my share before I introduce myself. I'm Liz Kalinowski-Ort. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Associate Director for Advising Curriculum and Retention in the College of Biological Sciences.
And I'm Sarah Campbell. I use she, her pronouns, and I am one of the associate directors of advising in the College of Liberal Arts.
So yes, we are really excited to just chat with you for this next hour about some of the changes that have gone into our A plus contacts and notes and guidelines materials. I know Amy just threw them in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to look over them, I highly encourage you to do that at some point. We'll do some highlighting of those things as we go through the slides here, but definitely take a minute to read through the updated guidelines as well as the scenarios. One thing that I wanted to make sure that was clear up front is this training is not a training on how to advise in crisis situations or helping students to navigate difficult situations. We are going to be focused on how to record information in the A plus platform. So just wanted to we can go down a lot of rabbit holes today, especially because we're going to be talking about different scenarios. So just know where the intention is just to focus on what should be recorded in A plus. So I wanted to just say that up front. Our agenda for today is to cover why there was a change, what changed, what's different from the other version. We're going to move into some practice time to apply the changes to the new, more real-world situations or scenarios that we have crafted. And then we'll want to encourage folks to share some reflections on and any insights that they have after they've gotten a chance to practice a bit. So that is our agenda for today. Hopefully you see what you wanted to see in the agenda, and we'll cover that. Um, Amy referenced that these changes came from a charge from the A Plus Advisory Committee, of which I am a member, as well as several other folks from throughout the university. And we just talk through different things or changes and updates around the A Plus platform. But they did charge us to create a working group to update the advising scenarios document and the contacts and notes document that were the guidelines. And that had last been updated in 2011, and a lot has happened since 2011. So less references to fax machines and more references to Zoom and other video kind of calls and meetings. I wanted to shout out our working group committee members, especially my co-chair, Gina Brewington. She put a lot of time and effort into helping me coordinate the committee, but also working closely with our campus partners. We started with updating the contacts and notes guidelines document, which then guided how we did our updates to the scenarios document. We You'll see the list of campus partners there. We consulted with those partners on scenarios that interacted with their offices to make sure that we were reflecting those interactions as accurately as possible and in the way that they wanted it to be reflected. So just wanted to shout out that piece. Okay, so that was the charge. So what changed in our committee work with the A plus contacts and notes? Really, we focused on clarifying the purpose of A plus. And to make that really clear both for ourselves and other users. I also do want to note here, it's not just advisors who use A plus. We have partners across campus that also use A plus. And that's part of the purpose too, right? So that we can provide continuous support. A student isn't, having repeated interactions with every single person that they interact with. I also like that I know who the student has interacted with, so I can avoid the repeat referral to the same office over and over again. I think that's a great use for it. But we clarified this purpose in that A plus is a core element of how we provide good service to students here at the U, and as a system, right? It documents student interactions in person, virtual, phone calls, emails, other communications, and it allows for a focus on key issues for the student. So that we just clarified that as a big piece of why we have A plus and why it is used. So what did change in the document? We I mentioned this before. We updated some language around uh, current advising technology, pronoun use, and reference the great work that was done on the pronoun use document. And then also clarified the difference between a contact versus a note in A plus. So I'll just state it again here just for clarity. The contacts tab is where we record our interactions with students. And the notes tab in A plus is where we record information about the student's academic record when no interaction with the student has taken place. And we have a scenario later on that kind of clarifies that a little bit. But I think most folks are pretty clear on contact versus note, but we clarified that within the guidelines document if you're curious. Um, and then we also put in guidance for editing your notes. We have multiple ways to edit our contact notes now, which we'll go over in an upcoming slide. And then finally, the advising scenarios document. Those were updated to reflect current best practices as well as some current concerns. And what I really like about that advising scenarios document is that it's really robust. So if it wasn't a part of your onboarding as an advisor, I really encourage folks to look through it. There's tons of different scenarios in there for you to think through how you might respond in any given student scenario, as well as how you would record that interaction within the A plus document.
So one of the things that we want to talk through today are some of the guidelines and considerations around the new document. And part of it is making sure that students know what the purpose of A plus is. As Liz said, it's to provide that continuous network of support and to make sure that they know that they can contribute to co-creating their academic record. A plus shouldn't be a secret to students. They should know that it exists. They should know that we use it to communicate with each other, and make sure that they have the support that they need. And if you are unsure about something, you can always ask a student, like, how would you feel about this particular thing being included in your A plus record? We also want to encourage people to keep current on updating A plus notes. Other offices are looking at them, and it's really helpful when a student goes from one office to another that there is a note in there about what happened at the previous office. So making sure that you are doing those on a regular basis and not letting those notes sit empty for too long is really helpful. And I know some of our units have different guidelines and expectations around, how quickly those notes need to be entered. So check with your supervisor in your unit for the expectations and guidelines for you. A couple other considerations with A plus notes. I don't know if anybody else has looked at an A plus note that's like a wall of text. It can be a little difficult to find what you're looking for. So bulleted statements, summaries are really helpful, easier to scan if somebody else is going back and looking for a quick, like, okay, did the student get communication about a particular thing? So having that bulleted list is a nice way to organize your notes. When we're talking about A plus notes, we also want to focus on facts and events, not conjecture, not kind of our opinions on things, but what we told the student, what the student said to us, what the fact of a particular situation is. And this is all can be very nuanced. So consult with your supervisor about, what to include if you're unsure, because yes, there are lots of gray areas. This is not necessarily black and white. One thing I did want to touch on and spend a little bit of time on is personal notes. So many of us take notes on paper. We might use the AI Zoom notes feature when we're meeting with a student virtually to, take those notes during an appointment. Just because you have personal notes that aren't in A plus does not mean they're private. So it's okay to have your personal notes to help inform what you're going to put in A plus, but these are not solely yours. They are considered part of the academic record and they can be subpoenaed. So once you are done using those personal notes, make sure that they're destroyed on the same timeline as like you would destroy any other sort of sensitive information. A personal note might include like reminders about sensitive information about the student. It might include a graduation plan and a separate document, for example. Some of us use like Google Docs to kind of keep track of like degree plans and graduation timelines and things like that. So for best practice for personal notes, keep them separate from the regular student files, hard copy or electronic. Don't share them with others. If you have a document that you're sharing with the students, a lot of folks will have like that graduation plan where they have it shared with the student and themselves and the student are editing it. That's fine, but there's no reason to keep it after that student graduates. These should be kept in a secure place, so don't leave them laying around. Make sure that you're aware of who folders and things like that are shared with. And they should be properly destroyed or disposed of when they're no longer needed. So this would include also things like AI summaries from Zoom meetings. So if Zoom is emailing you a summary of a student meeting after that meeting is done and you're using that to write your notes, make sure you're deleting that both from your email and from the Zoom sort of file on your computer once you're done. And the standard for the content of private notes really should be the same as public notes because again, they can be subpoenaed. They are part of a student's record. If you're unsure about what to do, again, consult your supervisor. You can always email the A plus folks at aplus@umn.edu too. Like there's a lot of nuance with all of this. So these are guidelines. They're not hard and fast rules. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about like some guidelines for A plus. Let's talk about what to include in our A plus notes. So things to make sure that we're putting in there: information relevant to student progress towards degree or career, how many credits they have left, what requirements they have left, those types of things. Information about student path, if they're going to take a semester or a year off, if they are thinking about transferring to a different college here at the university, or they're thinking about transferring out of the university entirely. Context information about the student and the advice provided. So this may be why you recommend a student take this class instead of that one, those types of things. Lists of courses for registration alternatives. This is really helpful if you have students that might be coming to your drop-ins and need help with registration, and because a particular class is full, then somebody else can look and see, okay, these other classes were also alternative choices. Student decisions on advising recommendations and possible impacts. So, for example, you might recommend that a student take a particular class or not take a particular two classes together or stay under a certain credit load, and they make a different choice. That's okay. That is their right. But document what you recommended and what their decision was and what the possible impact of that decision is. If you're referring a student to another office, that's also really helpful, especially if you can include a note, referring to psych department for major declaration or something like that. Action items requested from the student and the timeline on those. Sarah will follow up with student next week on transfer credit from Normandale, those types of things. And then notes that will facilitate the relationship. General notes, non-sensitive notes. Student is interested in football. Student is going to Spain. Those types of things. And then finally, we also want to make sure we're including communication to and from faculty, staff, and third parties. The caveat here is these are not A plus notes, these are contacts. So when you are putting something like that in, it should be under a contact, not under an A plus note. Okay. Um, this could include something like an error on a student's academic record and how the error was resolved. It could include information about, a parent calling. It could include communications between yourself and a departmental advisor regarding, something going on with the student's academic record, those types of things. Oh, I think this is you. You're
Yep,
up.
this is me. Yes. Okay, so we all make mistakes in our work. And so because of that, we have multiple ways to edit our notes when appropriate. So if it's a minor error, you would want to go into A+, find the student's profile, go into the contact tab and click on the modify contact button. And then just click on add note to clarify or correct a minor error. In this situation, when I make a mistake, a normal mistake for me to make on a hopefully not regular basis is when I'm advising students about their chemistry track. So in CBS, we have our students take Chem 1082 and 1086. 1086 is the lab, of course. And sometimes if I'm working with a student, I could default back to the other chemistry track and say 1066 instead of 1086. I might make a modification or add a note to say, whoops, I meant 1086, not 1066 for that chemistry lab. So that's an example of a minor error that would need to be corrected in that way. A major error, so sometimes, especially when we get busy, you might have like a duplicate drop-in appointment put on your list of student contacts, or even sometimes, this doesn't happen very often, but if the wrong student is added for an appointment, those are kind of major errors where a contact would want to be deleted. I've also had it happen where sometimes if you're trying to do A+ contact notes for a bunch of students at one time, you might record notes for the wrong person under the wrong profile. So if that sort of thing happens, you can just request it's usually your supervisor or whoever your unit A+ coordinator is. They have the option. There's actually a request delete button feature for a few users. And we kind of assess the situation and can delete and then correct that error when appropriate. So we all make mistakes. It's okay. We have ways to edit it. So talk to your supervisor about that. Some other things in the guidelines that I wanted to point out. We often interact with students around sensitive information. And especially in the process of talking all of this through with our working group and with various partners, I've just had the opportunity to kind of think through what should be included in the A+ record and spots where maybe, ooh, I want to be more intentional. One of those areas is in CCing or excuse me, BCCing A+ rec. And making sure that I'm reading through the full thread of interaction with a student. So if I know a student maybe reached out to me regarding, hey, I was recently hospitalized for this, situation, and I need help requesting incompletes. I might be responding, and the way I'm responding, I'm just telling them how to request incompletes. But that information about the student was hospitalized is still in the thread, and it really doesn't need to be. So just being thoughtful about reading through the full thread or recognizing when sensitive information is in there. And then you might need to paraphrase the email, or sometimes I'll just redact information in brackets and say information redacted, so that the A plus email is in the record, but that sensitive information is not a part of the record. Other pieces to just be thoughtful about, any information regarding interactions with the Office of Community Standards should be left out. That obviously will be on a different platform. So the information is recorded elsewhere if a student has been accused of cheating or other things around our community standards. Um, just being thoughtful about when we're including OCS information. Um, I want to shout out, we do have a role as mandated reporters. Obviously, we need to continue to report when we have students that let us know about sexual assaults or discrimination or those types of things. Those interactions, those incidents should not be recorded in A plus. They will be recorded through care reports or the other reporting features that we have on campus. Um, in our conversations with the Office of General Counsel, we had a lot of conversation around considering who else has access to A plus. So while everyone who has access to A plus is obviously beholden to FERPA, there's just some information that not everybody needs to know. So thinking through what is included. Does sharing this with more individuals benefit the student more or less? That's a good question to ask ourselves as we're thinking about what to include. If you need support around recording notes, I would say connect with your supervisor. A plus at umn.edu is a great resource as well and can connect you with other folks if you have questions about whether or not to include something. Usually your supervisor will be able to help you in that situation more often than not. My rule that I use, and I invite others to use it as well if it serves you, is when in doubt, leave it out. So that's how I make that determination. I know CLA has done a lot of work around kind of these more difficult gray areas of what to include in their notes or not. Sarah, if you want to share a little bit about what you all have chatted about.
Yeah, so there have been a number of folks doing some work on this over the last couple of years. So thank you to all of those folks from CLA who've been involved in that process. But some of the things that you can ask yourself when you're writing your notes are, is this something that the student would want other people to know? I think that that's really helpful. Thinking about, okay, yes, is it, are they telling me or are they, is that something that they would want other people to know? Um, is this something that another advisor would need to know? And if they need to know it, why do they need to know it? Do they need to know it in order to provide the student with appropriate advising? Or is it just information?
Mhm.
Is this something that's within the scope of my practice to say? We're advisors. I think this is the one that comes up most frequently. We are advisors. We are not mental health practitioners. So thinking about like what is in our scope and what is outside of our scope. So do I have the necessary training? Is this something like in my area of expertise?
Mhm.
So those are some ways to kind of some questions to ask yourself as you're writing notes, particularly on something that might be a little bit more sensitive.
Yeah. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I really going through the process of having these conversations with my colleagues, across campus as well as across the system. I used it as an opportunity to just re-examine my own practice, and kind of think about, ooh, what am I including? What maybe I should think twice about. So. I want to just pause here and take a few questions. I saw some things pop into the chat.
Yeah, there's one question that just came in, one that's already been answered. But the question that's open right now is if you see an A plus note that you feel is oversharing, do you approach the person that wrote it to modify the note or their supervisor?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it probably depends on your relationship with that colleague. I think I always encourage folks, like work together and like share your thoughts around that. I think it's okay to reach out to their supervisor as well. I think it might be better received in a more direct way, as an opportunity for learning and discussion for both of you. But that would be my response to that. Sarah, anything?
No, yeah, I would say the same thing, right? It's always, we're all learning, we're all growing, we're all gonna, you know, probably at some time do, put something in a note that we're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, right? So coaching each other and talking through those things. And yes, the notes are modifiable. Your coordinators for your units have access to do that. So if you see something like let's work together to come up with better language for that note and fix it.
Yeah. And I know everyone's just trying to do their best. There's a lot that we're, navigating as advisors on campus and the context within which we are working right now. So again, it is okay to make mistakes. I think again the purpose of having this discussion right now is just to encourage folks to pause and to think about, hey, would I record things differently than I have in the past? And maybe the answer is no, and that's okay. So, um, is BCCing A plus rec different than BCCing class rec? In the end, no, but the um the new updated class rec is A plus rec. But I know for folks who've been on this campus for a long time, it's a hard thing to change. So it ends up in the same place, but the new BCC, the preferred BCC is A plus rec, if you will. So if you can start working that into your practice, we encourage you to do that. So, but I know it's hard because we're just on autopilot a lot. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions right now, so I am going to move to an example to share with you all to help us kind of think through some of this. Um, so I'll read the example out loud. So Maria Rodriguez, a biology major, was rushed to the hospital for emergency appendectomy surgery. Her mother, Elena Rodriguez, immediately called their college advising office to report the medical emergency. An advisor accepted the information and notified Maria's professors that she would be absent for a critical recovery period of 1 week. So that's our scenario. That's what happened. That was the incident. Um, so in this example, we would record an A plus note. We would be using the note tab and adding it to the student's record as an A plus note, not a contact, right? Because there was no interaction with the student. We were interacting with the mother. And we recorded the student's mother called the advising office and reported that they will be absent for the next week, contacted professors and academic advisor for follow-up with the student, encouraged parent to have student connect with advisor after they are recovered. So really not a lot of information about the medical emergency that happened. We just know that the student will be absent, and have the information that we need to help the student move on with their academic goals in this situation. So that is the scenario and the A plus